right? Is the administration ready? It's 5:15. Let's continue. Please continue, Ms. Chor. Please switch on the mic. Yes. The next security. The definition is Computer System Security Management Unit. In relation to a CI operator means a unit maintained by the operator under Section 21(1). Code of practice will deal with that under the relevant ordinance. Tribunal means tribunal conducted, established by under an ordinance. Please, Ms. Doreen Guang. A question about organization. It includes a company or any other body corporate. Does it cover, well, for the sake of completeness, has this partnership? Would you cover partnership, which is not a company? Here we only include a company and any other body corporate. Because we think for critical infrastructure, usually it involves a company, but we don't rule out that it may also involve a partnership. But generally speaking, the operator of a critical infrastructure, well, as far as the actual situation goes, do not really involve any partnership. So we said it includes a company. So this is not a restrictive definition. So theoretically, it can also cover a partnership. May I make a suggestion, Madam Chair? You talk about includes, but it only includes a company and any other body corporate. I would rather have a wider definition, because this bill is supposed to be forward-looking. In other jurisdictions, they have a wider definition. They will include a partnership or funds. Would the administration give some consideration to this definition? As I've said, for those covered, for those who are potentially to be designated as critical infrastructures, they would be larger organizations. They are not really funds or partnerships. But the term organization can cover those. In other laws, other forms of organization may also covered. But here we only cover the general form of organization, that is either a company or a body corporate. And partnerships and funds are not the major targets that we want to cover, which are usually big organizations. So we believe that the definition can cover all of them. So that's the legislative intent. I'm not asking you to adopt my suggestion as such. For critical infrastructure or computer system, there's no need to seek your approval to install a critical infrastructure in the form of a computer system. There's no licensing required. So it's always better to have a wider definition. instead of finding to your surprise in the future that certain organizations are not covered, but I don't mind if you would not like to go down this route. I accept the explanation. All right, we'll look at the mechanism again when we come to the relevant clauses. As for authorized officer, it means in relation to the section 50 bracket 1, the authority, a person appointed by the commissioner. As for function, it includes a power and duty. And critical infrastructure means any infrastructure that is essential to the continuous provision in Hong Kong of an essential service in the sector specified, or any other infrastructure the damage or loss of functionality may hinder or otherwise affect the maintenance of societal or economic activities in Hong Kong. As for the obligations, Category 1 means an obligation imposed by Division 1 of Part 4. Category 2 obligation means an obligation which may affect the activities. Mr. of Hong Kong, Mr. Ngan Man Yu. Thank you. For A, I'm concerned about the word continuous. If a critical infrastructure is not essential to the continuous provision, if some organization or infrastructure has been designated to provide essential service, so is it a necessary precondition that the provision is continuous in nature? With regard to the requirement that is an continuous provision of an essential service, because the provision of the service is really about an essential service specified in Schedule 1. Services specified in Schedule 1 cover 8 sectors. They are provided continuously to the general public, whether about land, sea, and air transport and other transport infrastructure. What we want to stress is that the services as specified in Schedule 1 and the continuous provision is essential, is critical for Hong Kong. These services are continuously provided. I know that these provisions of the services is continuous, but the operator may not be providing continuous provision. If an operator is suddenly appointed to provide certain essential service, then the provision is not continuous. Here you are providing a definition of the infrastructure, and that is the service, the essential service is continuously provided. That is to say, the service is continuous and not for some specified time frame. We just want to highlight that the service in question is provided continuously in Hong Kong. And the critical infrastructures means that any infrastructure that is essential to the continuous provision of the service. It's not about the operator. Of course, there may be a change of operator, and would require that when there's such a change, a notification requirement is imposed. We have another definition of the operator, and we highlight the control exercise over the critical infrastructure. And here we are talking about the continuous service provider in the eight sectors specified in Schedule 1 and the importance of the service. Ms. Elizabeth quote, there are two limbs, A and B. A is in the sectors specified in Schedule 1. B is wider. Any other infrastructure, the damage, loss of functionality, and data leakage of which may hinder or otherwise substantially affect the maintenance of critical societal or economic activities in Hong Kong. This is a very wide definition. Can you tell us what are the infrastructures and what kind of damage has to be caused that would, or what loss of functionality would render such an infrastructure covered by B? In the last meeting, I gave some examples of the covered infrastructure. We may be talking about large performance venues or science parks. These are considered critical infrastructure because depending on the service provider, for example, for a performance venue, if the functionality is lost, the basic facilities for sound systems or power supply may be lost, and then the venue can no longer fulfill or cannot no longer function. And if there are computer systems controlling the main facilities, such as power supplies, sound reproduction, and also power supply may include air conditioning. If a venue does not have such functions, then it would not be able to function as intended. If it's subject to a hacking, for example, if we have a large performance venue house which can house more than 10,000 people, the loss of functionality may have a substantial adverse effect. In our science parks, there are the R&D facilities. Individually, the R&D facilities may not fulfill the criteria for critical infrastructure. But if on the whole the science park is rendered ineffective, then it may affect Hong Kong's societal or economic activities. So here are some examples. And this part would also be dependent on the actual nature of the functions of the infrastructure. So it cannot be specified as we do under A. This will be considered on a case-by-case situation, although this is the definition. In the bill, we have set out some factors to be considered. When we proceed to Part 3, when we would be considering the relevant factors in deciding whether one is a critical infrastructure.
Ms. Elizabeth Kwok, the performance venues housing 10,000 people, this is a clear definition. Why don't you include it in A as well? You can there are science park venues, why don't you include these venues under A as well? Thank you, Ms. Kwok. In A, critical infrastructure means any infrastructure that is essential to the continuous provision in Hong Kong of an essential service in the sector specified in Schedule 1. We emphasized just now continuous and essential. Performance venues don't necessarily constitute these elements. By essential, we mean general public need to take public transport on a daily basis. They need energy on a daily basis. So these will meet the requirement under A, that is essential. For performance venues or research and development parks, however, not necessarily all members of the public need these facilities on a daily basis. If, however, they lose function, this will substantially affect the maintenance of critical societal or economic activities in Hong Kong. So they fall under the category of A. They don't fall under the category of A. For B, however, depending on different infrastructures, say performance venues, not all of the performance venues will lead to significant economic impact. So we cannot generalize all performance venues form one single category. We have to take a look at the infrastructures one by one. Next, Mr. Lai Tong Kwok. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like you to look at B under the definition, which may hinder or otherwise substantially affect the maintenance of critical societal or economic activities in Hong Kong. For the previous two words, hinder, you didn't explain hinder. Hinder may cover a lot of things. These two situations are far cry from one to another. Under what circumstances will it hinder the maintenance of critical societal or economic activities in Hong Kong? Well, we didn't really define hinder. The difference if the maintenance or provision of services is hindered, in some situations, a positive act is a positive one. However, when it comes to hindrance, it means what could have been provided could not be provided. That's hindrance. And these are two different concepts. For substantial impact, when data are damaged, lost, hindrance may be caused. Once there is hindrance, service provision is affected. In relation to impact, depending on the magnitude, the scope may be different. So we don't think we should add serious to the definition of hindrance. The word hinder means the provision of services is not smooth as it could have been. So the function couldn't be performed as a result. Well, Ms. Wong, do you want to let the DOJ explain? Other infrastructures for maintaining important societal and economic activities. DOJ. Thank you, Madam Chair. The word hindrance carries a negative connotation. So, in the course of drafting, as long as something has a negative impact, then it fits the description of hindrance under B. The word effect may be positive. That's why we add the word substantially, just to preclude any other positive impact. Can you touch it up a bit? Just now we spent a long time discussing the word adverse. There is no such word as adverse in this definition. There's the word substantially. So in terms of the extent, they could be wildly different. Given the importance of the definition of critical infrastructures, the administration should think what they should include in the definition. The crux of the matter is what you want to include. In B, you want to make it broad enough. So if the definition is clear, users will also feel comfortable in the future, so the administration may provide a written reply. Thank you, Mr. Kong. When it comes to drafting, I'd like to ask about B. Any other infrastructure? In the Chinese version, infrastructure is put way further from any in the Chinese version. Well, in the Chinese text, the noun is very far away from the word any. In B, the maintenance of critical societal or economic activities in Hong Kong, is national security covered as well? In the legislation in other jurisdictions, societal or economic activities also refer to those that have to do with national security. It's broader. I'd like to know whether this is included in the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ms. Doreen Kong. In relation to brackets B, the damage, loss of functionality, or data leakage of which may hinder or otherwise substantially affect the maintenance of critical societal or economic activities in Hong Kong, depending on individual cases, if the severity could be such as to affect national security, despite the fact that we didn't set out clearly right here. In my answer to another member's question, under the National Security Ordinance, there's a definition of critical infrastructures. Critical infrastructures have yet another definition, and they refer to public infrastructures. What we focus on is computer system. The coverage is limited. In a broader sense, as Mr. Kong mentioned, for the definition under the National Security Ordinance, it is related to national security as It is more than a computer system of critical infrastructures. It may have to do with cybersecurity. That's why the scope is wider than that of bracket B. Whenever it has to do with national security, we'll invoke the National Security Ordinance. Thank you. In relation to the Chinese text, I'd like to invite the DOJ to provide information. Indeed, the phrase any other should be made closer to the noun. In this scenario, if we put if at the start of the sentence, it will be less reader-friendly. That's why we put any other at the start of the sentence, so the readers will understand the entire sentence starts with a noun. And that's the case in the Chinese text. Mr. Benson Lok. Thank you, Madam Chair. In brackets A, it's clear relatively, especially when we set out specified in Schedule 1. However, in brackets B, continuous is not mentioned. Is it time limited or is it temporary? Just now, the administration mentioned performance venues. For instance, Qatar Sports Park or Hong Kong Coliseum. For central waterfront or harborfront is a vacant open-air space. For power system, if it is damaged, of course, it will affect societal or economic activities in Hong Kong. At the end of this year, we are going to hold national games. The area in Victoria Park will be turned into beach volleyball venues. Will they be classified as critical infrastructures as a result? DS, and a response? Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Benson Lok. I'd like to explain continuous. This word targets Schedule 1. In relation to Schedule 2, as we mentioned, mainly it's the critical infrastructures structures that are physical. For short-term venues, in contrast, they aren't covered under brackets B of this definition. On the land use, we don't use institution or organization as a unit. We don't impose any liabilities or responsibilities on organizations or institutions. The example given by Mr. Benson Lok just now is in the second category of critical infrastructures this bill targets. I see no follow-up from members. Schedule 1, does the administration want to take us through this page? C3060 in the Chinese text and C3061 in the English text. C3061, Schedule 1. It lists 8 sectors specified for the definition of critical infrastructures. 1. Energy. 2. Information technology. 3. Banking and financial services. 4. Air transport, 5. Land transport, 6. Maritime transport, 7. Healthcare services, and 8. Telecommunications and broadcasting services. Ms. Elizabeth Kwok.
我想確定一下，
Madam Chair, I'd like to confirm for 7 healthcare services, is the hospital authority a government department or not? Can you make it clear? Under the definition of critical infrastructures, DS, the hospital authority is not a government department, so it falls under the category of critical infrastructures. Is that correct? Yes, if it falls under the 7th category, that is, if it could be defined as a CI operator, and if it meets the requirement of CIs under this bill, there are definitions and considerations under Clause 12. That is about designating CI operators. Alright, the case of the HA is clear. What about other hospitals? Do all hospitals fall under the category of healthcare services? DS. When it comes to hospitals, in the definition of A, any infrastructure that is essential to the continuous provision in Hong Kong of an essential service. I believe most hospitals will meet this description, that is continuous and essential. We'll further consider other factors under Clause 12. Then we can decide whether hospitals will be designated as CI operators. Mr. Lai Tong Kwok? Well, Madam Chair, I'd like to go back to critical infrastructures. In brackets A, the word essential is used. Is there any definition of the word essential or critical infrastructures? You have to, well, I mean, there are critical infrastructures and necessary critical infrastructures. We have a definition for essential, but I see no definition for the other term. Can the administration explain?
唔該主席，
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lai. Essential service. Now, as I have explained, although we don't have a separate definition for the word essential, those services required by members of the public for the daily life can be considered essential services. Here, we refer to infrastructure that is essential to the continuous provision of an essential service. That is, without the infrastructure, the essential service cannot be maintained. Those infrastructure would fall within Part A of the definition. Mr. Lai, I think that's the issue with the Chinese text. In English, it is fine. In English, it says infrastructure that is essential to the continuous provision of an essential service. Does Mr. Lai have any problem with the English text? I don't. But the Chinese text is what we look at first. Yes. Please review the Chinese text of the definition. Next, Mr. Dennis Leung. Thank you, Chair. About item or sector number 7, healthcare services. What kind of healthcare services would be covered? For example, all over the territory, the FTU has set up clinics for workers. We do provide Chinese medicine and Western medicine services. So are those services included? Now, I just mentioned the broad category. However, there is no classification of the scale and number of service targets for the organizations. So that would leave a lot of organizations unprepared. Can we have a clearer explanation for the term? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chair. I thank Mr. Leung for his question. Schedule 1 only specifies the 8 broad sectors. In each sector, there are different critical infrastructures and different operators. So in defining or designating critical infrastructure, that comes down to Section 11 or Clause 11 under Part 3, including the types of service provided. Say if the service scale is very small and limited to members rather than the general public, or if the impact of the organization is small, like the example quoted by the member, in case of an attack, the scale of impact would fall much short of an attack on the hospital authority. So whether individual healthcare organizations are in scope depends on the various circumstances. Even if an organization is within the sector, depending on the types of services, the impact of an attack, and also the nature of the operator, an operator may be not a CI operator. It also depends on the core functions of the operator, the reliance on the critical computer system, and the level of control, the extent of control on the critical infrastructure of an operator. So Schedule 1 only sets out the 8 major sectors which largely cover essential daily services required by the public. In fact, which are critical infrastructures within the sectors and who are the critical infrastructure operator has to be read in line with the factors laid out in Part 3. Mr. Shang Hailong. Thank you, Chair. I have a question about healthcare services as well. 2 examples. Last time we discussed whether the emergency and accidents and emergency departments in private hospitals are critical infrastructure, while departments in relation to body checks are not critical. So are A&EDs of private hospitals critical infrastructure? Now in the Hetao area, the HA has set up a center for providing MRI and other scanning services for members of the public. Is that a piece of critical infrastructure? Deputy Secretary. Thank you. On private hospitals, again, whether a private hospital is designated as a CI operator depends on the factors mentioned in Clause 12 of the bill. On the last occasion, on whether there is a difference between A&ED and, say, palliative care departments in private hospitals, well, my point was about the computer system behind the departments. Now, the critical computer system supports the A&ED to provide a core function. On the other hand, for specialist department, which is not required by the public on a daily basis, they may fall outside the scope of the definition of critical infrastructure. But that very much depends on the scale of services and the nature of services provided by the private hospitals, whether they fulfill the factors mentioned in Clause 12, and also to what extent the critical infrastructure, the critical computer system supports the core functions of the hospital. Concerning the facilities in the hotel area and whether that would be in scope, again, it depends on the same list of factors. On whether they would be designated as critical infrastructure or CI operators. Ms. Elizabeth Court. Thank you, Chair. I would like to clarify the definition of telecommunications and broadcasting services. Now, the RTHK is a government body. However, the other broadcasters are not operated by the government. However, the level of computer security of radio and television stations can't compare with those in the banking sector, so they need more support and time. So is the government going to provide assistance to the sector? Deputy Secretary, thank you. Now, the Communication Authority is the designated authority for the telecommunications and broadcasting services sector. Like Ms. Quartz said, the licensees may be conventional broadcasters or licensees for telecommunication network operators. The model of operations and the reliance on computer system varies between these organizations. What necessary steps should these broadcasters take to enhance cybersecurity? And how are they doing at present? The Communication Authority will consider the operational needs of these regulatory targets and require enhancements on the part of these broadcasters. New COPs will be promulgated by the CA on these licensees so that they can fulfill categories 1 and 2 obligations under the law. For category 3, the COPs will be issued by the Commissioner. So depending on the specific situations and the operational needs of the broadcasters, a tailor-made set of requirements and standards will be made for licensees in this category. Next, Mr. Frankie Ngan. Mr. Frankie Ngan. Thank you, Chair. I have another scenario in mind. Cross-boundary healthcare. Many Hong Kong residents are living in the mainland, and they receive medical healthcare services in the mainland as well. So what about the computer system of those medical institutions? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Ngan. As I've mentioned, the bill does not carry any extra territorial effects. Now, if the institution is located outside Hong Kong, we have no power over them. In other words, if the medical institution has the personal information and medical records of Hong Kong residents under the, say, e-health or the healthcare voucher scheme, if they are located outside Hong Kong, they would be out of scope. Deputy Secretary. It depends on the nature of the institution. If the facility is outside Hong Kong, however, there are linkages between the computer systems of that institution and the depository in Hong Kong. And if the institution meets the requirements under Clause 11 and 12, and that they are CI operators, it's just that they have located parts of their operations in Hong Kong, outside Hong Kong. And if the back-end computer system of those services are accessible outside Hong Kong, then even though the delivery of service is located outside Hong Kong, if the computer system do support other core services of the institution in Hong Kong, then it will be in scope. But we are only targeting the parts of operations in Hong Kong and not just the core functions. If there is a computer system located outside Hong Kong with linkages to the system in Hong Kong, then the bill will still apply. So the situation varies according to the situation. So the factors I mentioned are key: whether the computer system is accessible by the operators outside Hong Kong and whether it supports the core functions of the operator. If so, the bill applies. Deputy Secretary, I think when we come to Clause 13, the picture will be clearer. Next, Ms. Elizabeth Court. Thank you, Chair. We are going to develop the low-altitude economy. There will be a lot of low-altitude transportation with a lot of taking off and landing sites on the ground. So will this be classified under Part B of the definition? Deputy Secretary, thank you. Concerning transportation, air, land, and maritime transports are covered by Schedule 1. So low-altitude economy mentioned by Ms. Elizabeth Court is mainly about drones on land and in the air. These will be covered. At present, we will keep monitoring the trend of the developments of these services to see whether there are other applicable sectors. It depends very much on whether the service providers falls under the definition of critical infrastructure operators under Clause 12. We will keep a close watch on the development trend in this area. Next, Mr. Pan Chen. Thank you, Chair. My question is very brief. Telecommunications and broadcasting services are one of the sectors in Schedule 1. So the name of this bill is Critical Infrastructures, brackets, Computer Systems. So the term computer system has been defined. So what about the plant room for the computer system, the server, the optic fiber network? Are they parts of the critical infrastructure, or are they just articles linked with the computer system? Are they parts of the critical infrastructure as well? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chan. Computer systems and computer plant rooms now, to meet the definition for computer system, which covers both hardware and software, if these computer systems are critical, then they are within scope. Now, hardware includes plant room and optical fiber. Now, whether the computer system is within scope depends on whether they meet the conditions specified in Clause 13. Mr. Chan? No further questions. Thank you. Please continue. Returning to the interpretation. Critical infrastructure operator. They are organizations designated under Clause 12. Critical computer system designated in Clause 13. Now we look forward to scrutinizing clauses 11 to 13 when we will know more about the conditions. If there are no further questions, I will invite the administration to continue. C2908. Brackets 2. In this ordinance, a reference to a critical infrastructure operated by a CI operator is a reference to a critical infrastructure in relation to which the operator is designated under Section 12. For the purposes, Ms. Doreen Kong. Thank you, Chair. When I'm reading brackets 2, 3, and 4, I have a big question mark on my head. I don't understand the purposes of these three subclauses. Now, in brackets 2.1, the definition was already very clear. In Clause 12, a definition for CI operator is given. Same goes for designated authorities and the power to designate CI operators. So why do we need to have subclauses 2 to 4? They are redundant. Drafting Division.
同事解釋啊。
I defer to my colleague from the drafting division. Well, Clause 2 is on definition, interpretation of certain terms. And in the bracket 2 to 3 and 4, it's not just about terms, but also certain reference. For example, a facility operated by a operator. We are talking about the infrastructure operated by a CI with reference to designated operator. An operator may operate three infrastructure, but only one is designated. If we don't clarify the matter, then people may may wonder whether all the three infrastructures are regulated and not just the designated one. This is for the purpose of providing clear definition. And that is in subclause 2, 3, and 4. They serve the purpose of clarification. Madam Chair, there are problems here. If an operator operates 3 critical infrastructures, so why do you just designate one? Of course, we should designate 3 critical infrastructures. I don't understand. I was just giving an example for illustration. The focus is that you talk about all infrastructure operated by the operator. We are talking about only those that are designated under Section 12. If we do not specify the matter here, then we need to clarify every time in later clauses. A CI operator is a reference to a critical infrastructure in relation to which the operator is designated under Section 12. Here, the purpose of this subclause is to provide a sort of label so as to save the need to repeat this in subsequent clauses, and that would make the reading of those clauses more straightforward. Legal advisor? Is this a common device to help people understand the term? I understand what the administration is trying to achieve. Perhaps the administration can give us some examples in respect of existing laws, so that a consolidated interpretation in terms of a subclause may help with the understanding of subsequent clauses. Perhaps some example would be helpful. For subclause 2, 3, and 4. Yes, please switch on the mic. I'd like to take the opportunity to explain what bracket 2, bracket 3, and bracket 4 are about, because the same will appear in later clauses. For bracket 2, it's a reference to a critical infrastructure operated by a CI operator. We're not talking about a critical computer system. We're talking about the operator of a critical infrastructure. You may notice that we are not going to designate critical infrastructure. We are going to identify a critical infrastructure, and then we will designate the operator which will be subject to the regulation. And then we will have the designated critical computer system, and the operator will have to show the certain responsibility over the designated computer system. So in later clauses, we will refer to the operators, the critical infrastructure operated by the designated operator. For bracket 3 and bracket 4, they are mainly about the commissioner and the designated authority and the distinction between the two. In later clauses, there are provisions on what the commissioner and a designated power can exercise certain powers. And the regulatory authority is the designated authority, and they have to regulate different operators. So we have to refer to some regulated of organization, which will be regulated by the designated authority. So we need to have bracket 3 and bracket 4 for this very purpose. It will be easier in the other clauses to know who would be responsible for which organizations and which power can be exercised by which authority. Yes, I have a follow-up question. In bracket 2, 3, 4, 5, and in some other sections or clauses, you have a reference to this ordinance or reference to for the purposes of this ordinance. Do you need this phrase for the purposes of this ordinance? Is it important? Sometimes it's for the purpose of section 13 or section 14. This I can understand. But if you look at bracket 2, 3, 4, 5, and section 3, section 5, for the purpose of section 11, for the purpose of section 12, what kind of a drafting principle is involved here? Law draftsman? This is just a customary practice. For example, section 2 is the interpretation and definition. So we state that for the purpose of this ordinance, such a term means such a thing, etc. Well, if the term applies throughout the bill, then you say for the purposes of this ordinance. But for legal proceedings under C2924, you will talk about for the purpose of that particular section. 234 applies to the entire bill. Is that the distinction you make? Can you clarify this? Can you confirm this? Yes. Ms. Doreen Kwong, I have no further question. I just want to point out that I can accept this in the interpretation section. I was asking a question about the drafting principle or standard that is applied. Unless there's another term defined in other ordinances. Otherwise, there's no need to repeat that this is for the purposes of the ordinance. So unless something is absolutely necessary, I hope the law draftsman can revisit this point about the need to repeat this reference so many times in the bill. A question about 3B. English or subsection 3B. A critical structure is otherwise a specified critical infrastructure for the commissioner. Does it mean that the commissioner will designate which critical infrastructure is a specified critical infrastructure? Administration or DOJ? I would respond first, and then I'll invite the law draftsman to supplement. For the term specified critical infrastructure, it's not designated by the commissioner. It's just a label given to the critical infrastructure for the purpose that I've explained. Put simply, who is responsible for managing the critical infrastructure in question. But A is about the regulation by the authority, specified authority. So in the sphere and the operator, in the relevant spheres and the relevant operators are regulated by the specified authority. Failing that, then covered by B, then we'll have B, equipped, that is, that covers other cases. Because other than this specified authority, designated authority, the other infrastructure will be regulated by the commissioner. When we proceed to the other clauses, we will understand which authority will be doing the regulation. So you mean that A is covered by the designated authority, and the rest is done by the commissioner. Can you confirm this? Oh, yes. All right. If there are no further questions, we can proceed to section clause 5 or subclause 5. We are talking about doing something without lawful authority. It means that if the person doing the act does so in excess of the person's authority or is otherwise not entitled to do so, then it means that an act is done without lawful authority. Any question? You talk about in excess of the person's authority. You don't talk about how the authority is conferred. It can be conferred by the law or by other provisions. So there's no need to specify the origin of that authority. Your understanding is correct. All right, we should proceed to part 2 now. And we are almost near, we're almost, we are close to 6:30, but let's proceed to part 2, regulating authorities. Please. Division 1, Section 3, Commissioner, and how the Commissioner is appointed. It will be appointed by the Chief Executive. Is responsible for running the office. It can identify the relevant, identify critical infrastructures and designate CI operators, monitor and supervise compliance, issue and maintain codes of practice, and regulate CI operators. Any reason why a term of no more than 5 years is specified in bracket 2, 3.2? We hope that the authority and the commissioner would enjoy certain level of continuity. Bear in mind that certain functions, for example, audits have to be submitted annually or biannually. So we want to make sure that the commissioner will be able to assess the reports not just once during his or her term. This would be beneficial to the issue of continuity and stability, and also clarity. So we hope the term, which should not be too long, but it would be good, and the commissioner is eligible for reappointment. The commissioner is also going to appoint certain specified officers. There will be a dedicated office which is not defined in the bill. Can you explain what this is about? The Commissioner's office? All the statutory functions will be exercised by the authority, and we call the authority commissioner. Previously, we informed members that there would be an office, a commissioner's office, to be appointed, and obviously the commissioner cannot deliver all the functions. So there will be an office under the commissioner, and there will be authorized officers to be appointed. So when we talk about the commissioner's office, we are referring to the commissioner and the organization set up to enforce the law. Which means that this is an execution or executory term. As the Madam Chair has said, the Commissioner can appoint authorized officers. And some of the functions can be delivered by the authorized officer. It's already 6:29. I'm grateful to members and the administration for enabling a very serious and careful scrutiny of the clauses. I hope the Bureau can give us replies with regard to members' questions and comments expeditiously. As for the following next meetings, the next one will be on the 23rd of January. We start at 2:30 p.m. Well, actually, we have a council meeting on that day, so we have specified that it would start 15 minutes after the conclusion of the council meeting, or any time later than all the way up to 6:30. The second meeting, the 6th of February. The third meeting, 14th of February, from 9 to 1 p.m. Well, without further ado, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.